One of my favorite methods to learn a language is to read a book, because I just love getting two benefits at the same time. I read something interesting, I learn something new, well, that's the first benefit, and I learn a language at the same time, because you only improve your comprehension with a lot of input, right? And a lot of people ask me what books I recommend reading. I usually recommend reading non-fiction literature, because I think it's much easier to understand in a foreign language which you are just learning. And I generally prefer to read non-fiction, because I like to read, I like to learn something from the books that I read. So I decided to make two videos in which I will present my 20 most favorite books. I will divide them into categories. The first one will be about business or about my professional growth, and the second will be my personal growth, and I can recommend a few books to you that might also help you. So let's start with the business section. I want to introduce a few books that I really loved reading and that taught me a lot. One of the top guys that I recommend for learning about business marketing, especially in info business, is Russell Brunson. I really like the advice that he gives, and this book is incredibly valuable for any entrepreneur or someone who wants to be an entrepreneur, especially if you want to position yourself as an expert in a topic. And this, I think, is the Bible of marketing for anyone out there doing any business. So that would be my tip number one. The second one that I also want to mention is Brendon Burchard, who wrote an interesting book. I have this one in Spanish. I think it's called The Millionaire Messenger in English. And it's a very interesting book about info business and expert business as well, just like Brunson, but this one is more of an introduction to people who are just interested in that, so I recommend reading it, maybe just to learn about how it works and whether it would be something for you too. I also want to mention one book. I don't have it in a physical format because I read it, I listened to it as an audiobook. It's called Rework. And it's probably the most practical manual for business, for entrepreneurs out there. I really, really like it. It's very practically written, so you just listen to it or you read it, and it's just full of advice and practical tips. And what I like about it most of all is that it proves some of the general advice wrong. Because there are a lot of things out there for entrepreneurs, what you should do and how you should do it, and you should plan your exit strategy, and you should start a startup and all these things. And the author of this book just totally explains why all of this is probably not such a good idea to do if you want to start doing a serious business. And I think it's also written in a very nice and friendly way. So definitely recommend Rework. Then we have Michael Gerber's E-Myth. I have this one in Slovak, and it's also a very nice story about entrepreneurship and business. I think this is ideal for people who maybe are not businessmen yet but want to know what it takes, because Michael walks you through the process of an entrepreneur, a character in the book, who wants to have a bakery, but she doesn't really know how to do the business and how to manage people, and he explains it in a very simple way what having a business is all about. So I think this is easily readable for anyone out there. I actually read this one in Russian. It was my first book which I read in Russian, and my level was not that high at that time, and I could follow it very easily. So language-wise, this book is really simple to read. From the books I've presented so far, this would be my choice number one if you want it for language purposes and you're interested in the topic as well. Okay, let's have a look at another book. This is not strictly business, this is more about quality of life. And I think you have probably heard about this book, David Allen, Getting Things Done, or GTD. It's now a huge phenomenon, many people follow it strictly, and it's like their lifestyle, you know, the way of their lifestyle basically, because David explains how you should manage your life, organize your life, so that you are not stressed out and you can really have time for things that matter. And what I really loved about this book, he explained it at the very beginning, is that the goal is not that you can work more hours and get more things done, but that whenever you do something, you know that this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing and you feel good about it. You know how it is when you are maybe chatting with a friend, having a coffee, or just reading a book for just pleasure, just free time, and you are feeling guilty because you should be answering some emails or you should be doing other things. Well, David explains exactly how to organize your life so that this doesn't happen, and it's easily applicable. The important thing, of course, is to apply it in practice, not just read it. But I highly recommend this book. It's really awesome, and it's been translated into like 30 languages, so you can also use it for language purposes as well. Another book I want to mention is Charles Duhigg and The Power of Habit. I have this one in Polish, so you will have all the names of the books in the original titles in English below this video, okay? So that this doesn't confuse you. So this book is about forming habits and how we function based on habit forming. It's really interesting, also very easily readable, although the book is pretty big. And I think it's useful for anyone out there. It's not just for people interested in habits for any specific purpose, but this is very easily applicable in your everyday life. So I would say these two books definitely improve the quality of life just by understanding how things work. And this one is a very practical manual how to actually reorganize your life as well. Now I want to mention two books which are interesting if you're interested in being a digital nomad. That means an entrepreneur who is location independent. You want to live off something that you like doing, and you can travel the world if you want, or you can be, in your garden all the time, but you have the freedom to move wherever you want to. The book number one, and I think you can guess it, is of course Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. And this book has inspired so many people. It's a huge, basically a movement out there about this book where people realize that they don't want to have the 9-to-5 job all their lives, and they want to have more freedom. And Tim is an expert in taking shortcuts. He will explain to you how you can do your stuff, your work more efficiently, how you can persuade your boss to raise your salary, and how you can slowly take steps to maybe having your own business one day. I think it's useful for people who also don't necessarily want to have their own business, but just to also improve the quality of their work and get a few interesting ideas. This book is definitely worth reading. And the second book I want to mention about digital nomads is Johnny F. Dee's Life Changes Quick, which I think is a very nice example story of how this can happen in practice. So Tim Ferriss will tell you the theory and the manual, the steps how to do it, and Johnny basically tells his life story about how he has achieved it to become location independent, to have more freedom in his life, to gather some wealth by investments. And it's an incredibly interesting story because you follow his steps from being an American guy who went to Thailand to be a diver, but it didn't quite work out financially. It wasn't such a good job, and so he was taking steps one by one to improve his life, to work on himself, on his physical body, on his relationships, and he became a digital nomad and now inspires thousands of people with his blog and podcast. I know Johnny in person. He's a very nice guy, and I know that this story is a true one, so I definitely recommend reading that if you want inspiration to be a digital nomad, maybe. I was thinking about what books to include in here, and I decided to pick ones that helped me in my professional life in different areas. So that was business and marketing, some like personal management or improvement of quality of life, digital nomadism, if I can call it like that. And now let's have a look at public speaking. I want to mention the book TED Talks, which is the official guide by the TED curator Chris Anderson. I read it when I was preparing for my TED Talk. They recommended it to me from TED. They said you should definitely read this, and it was such a good book that I read it in a weekend. And if you do any public speaking, I think you should definitely read this book because it helps you structure your ideas, helps you decide what you should talk about, how you should communicate your message to the audience. And I've learned a lot from this book, seriously. So highly, highly recommend it for public speaking. And finally, of course, as a language mentor, I need to mention a book about languages, right? And I want to mention Steve Kaufman's book. It's The Linguist. I'm sure you've heard about Steve Kaufman if you have heard anything about polyglots out there. He has a huge YouTube channel. He's a Canadian, a very inspiring polyglot because he started to learn languages massively well in his 60s. And in this book, he basically tells his life story, the story of learning languages and how he figured out things. And what I love about it is that it gives some general principles about language learning, which I very much agree with, which really are aligned with my language learning style and how I see language learning. And I like that Steve offers this in a very easy to read way. It's a story. He basically shares his experience, and I believe it's really very inspiring and full of really amazing tips to learn languages. So these are the 10 books that I decided to share with you, give some tips. If you are looking for something to read and something got your attention from the books I mentioned, then check out the links below this video so that you can check them out, the exact titles and the authors. And I hope the books help you in any way and help you in your professional development as well as they have helped me. In the second video, I will talk about the books that helped me in my personal growth or personal life. So if you're interested in a few more reading tips, then check out the second video.